about it is you have to release your past and create your future so you can love your now. And I guess one of the foundational laws of the universe, which is that everything is vibrating, nothing rests. Right? Everything is constantly moving. And you can study physics or chemistry, or you can study spirituality, and they'll both basically tell you the same thing. Everything is moving. So if you understand the principal laws of how the world works, then you can apply them to yourself and it makes it easier. So acknowledging that emotion is there, because it's not the thought that's the problem. It's the emotion that's tied into the thought that's the problem. It's how we feel about what we're thinking, right? And the beauty of it is that we can step outside of that space and look at what we're thinking and feeling, and then we can make a different choice.
Welcome back to the Profit Scaling Podcast. I am here with Jennifer. She is a PhD, a Christian medium, author, and healer, and she has actually worked and taught as a physical therapist for 23 years before God called her to her current path, and that happened in 2014. She delights in helping her clients heal generational trauma, coming into Christ, and actually creating a life of freedom. She's a published author with her book, When God Speaks, Finding Meaning and Purpose in a Fallen World. So I'm so glad to have you on the podcast today. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited, Jay.
Awesome. Well, we'll jump right into it. I'd love to hear what prompted you to transition. Like, what was the moment when you were like, oh, this is the new path for me back in 2014?
Yeah. So I had taken 12 years to get a master's and a PhD. It's supposed to take 6, whatever. It took me 12. And then when I took my job teaching in a PT program, I thought I would be there forever. It was literally my dream job. Everything was perfect. And I get 2 years in and I realized I'm depressed and unhappy and I can't do it anymore. Okay. I thought, oh my gosh, now what?
Yeah, because that much time investment, and then you're like, oh my gosh, I really don't like this. So in that moment, take me back. Is like, what did you start thinking of? Like, did you have a plan, or like you were just like, I need to get out?
I had no plan. I had, you've probably done this because you've been successful. You have your goals and you have a vision for your life. And I had never had a vision that took me past that point. So I really didn't have anything else to pivot to or to go toward. I just knew that I wasn't happy. But by that time, I got married in 2014 and my husband's an entrepreneur. So that was very helpful. And I just started praying and searching and praying and searching. And I got led, like the little breadcrumbs came and I kept getting led along my little path. And in 2015, 2015, I was actually able to completely resign from that and took the leap of faith, and I've been just figuring it out ever since.
Amazing. Yeah, that's often what at least people that I've talked to is like they get to a point in there. For me, I lasted 1 year in a corporate job, and then I was like, okay, that's it. So so you had me beat. You lasted 2 there. But yeah, that's the same thing that happened to me. Is like I was just like, man, this is not what I saw. Like what the next 4 to 6 years of my life could be, and then I was like, I feel like I can do better on my own in a different path. So amazing. So you jumped into entrepreneurship, and was that when you like wrote your book, or you started like online courses? What, like, take me through like what you initially just started with.
Yeah, so what I actually started with was getting certified in something called the Emotion Code, which is energy healing by a guy named Dr. Bradley Nelson.
Okay.
So part of it was there were a whole bunch of transitions happening. So, right, like breaking free, it was basically about breaking free from the way I'd been programmed to live, which was go to school, get a good job, get a good education, get a job, work at that job for forever and retire. But when you're starting that path and you're 40, like that doesn't work, right? I looked at my paycheck and how long it was going to take me to save up for a down payment on a house. And I was like, there's no way. There's got to be another way. So I was searching, and that's always the key. Like if you're searching for something, you will find it. That's the promise, right? I love that.
Yeah.
So part of what I was searching for was not only some other work I could do, but I was also searching for healing from my family patterns and things that I had come from that just were not supportive for me. So the energy healing is where I actually started, and what I still use most of what I do today to help my clients.
For sure. So out of curiosity, like take me a little bit, like kind of a general overview of like what energy healing is and then how, yeah, let's just go with the general overview, and then I have a couple more questions along that path.
Awesome, perfect. So the way I like to talk about energy healing is to talk about emotions.
Mm,
So most of us growing up, no matter how happy your household is, some emotions are not okay, and sometimes it's not okay to feel them or express them. And we're not generally taught how to deal with our emotions and what to do with them.
mm,
So they get stuck in our bodies. And when they get stuck, they're meant to move into flow. All of our energy is meant to move and flow. And when anything gets stuck over time, it creates dis-ease. And that can happen on your physical level, the mental, emotional, spiritual level. So the energy work is a simple way to identify the things that have become stuck
mm.
and then release them from your system so that you can have more flow and more movement. And when we get rid of stuff, we always replace it with something else. And so we replace it with love or anything that resonates along those lines for people.
Amazing. Yeah. So I've done, I don't know if I've done energy healing, but I've definitely done emotional development work within myself, going into, I don't know if it was like psychological development or like childhood traumas and like releasing those. So take me a little bit into, because it sounds like you studied under someone or you studied from someone in like in the emotionals. Take me a little bit through that, because I think it's oftentimes I mean, people are becoming more aware, thankfully, but it wasn't as talked about in society like even 10 years ago. So I'd love for you to just, yeah, kind of give insight into like emotional well-being, especially as men. At least I was taught still of just like, yeah, suppress those things. Like, yeah, feelings. No, it's like you can be happy and like you can be ambitious and go after things. That's about it though.
Yes. Oh, for sure. Yeah, so I really, when you asked me about who I studied with or studied under, I learned the energy work from Dr. Brad, but the specifics of like how to help people, myself and other people, how to help people really deal with the emotions, it's really like the spirit that has taught me and just all my own personal experience. And I think that our lessons stem from our childhood, right? So whatever you learned in your childhood in a maybe quote unquote negative way, and I say that with quotes because it starts out feeling negative, but it's actually not in the long run. That like the opposite of that is kind of what you move toward. So I'm all about helping people express
Mhm.
what they have, whether that's their feelings, their dreams, their goals, because we didn't really talk about things in my household.
Mm.
And that just isn't working for me anymore, right? Like now we're here on a podcast, so I can talk.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of our, so one of the three key pillars is actually vision with profit scaling. And it's like, and casting that vision for yourself, for your team, for others. So it sounds like that's like getting people to identify and actually speak about those dreams, goals, or a future is super important when it comes to is it emotional well-being or healing, or how do you use that within it?
Yeah, with the emotional well-being, there's the way I like to talk about it is you have to release your past and create your future so you can love your now.
Okay.
And when a lot of people have trauma, depending on the stage of growth that they're so stuck in that trauma that they can't even see, like they just kind of lose hope and the ability to have a vision. So sometimes we just really have to focus on healing as much of the trauma as we can, and then they can start to have some sense of being capable of moving into a vision.
Mhm.
But as much as possible and as early as possible, I like to help people think about what do you want from this? What are you looking to get? And it doesn't have to be like 10 years from now, where do you want to be? No, like in 5 minutes from now, what would you like?
Mhm.
Right? If you're feeling really badly and you don't want to stay there, that's okay. But instead of just saying, well, I don't want to feel angry, well, what do you want instead? What do you want to move toward? And that's kind of the basic process of dealing with all those emotions. It's you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I think that's why a lot of people don't heal. So I always say, like, right, if like the work you've done, that's courageous
Mm.
because most people don't want to do that because it doesn't feel good.
Mhm.
But if we can learn to sit with those uncomfortable feelings, they always pass. Like I promise, they will pass.
Amazing. So,
Yeah.
so out of curiosity then, because I like a lot of people I talk with, like relationships can be a big thing. In business, in life, like there can be a lot of trauma that goes into that, like from childhood or bringing it into actual relationships. So let's say, because a lot of times you talked about the uncomfortability and like not wanting to like go to the uncomfortable like places. So is it like going back into like memories or like things that you can't get out of your mind and then like moving past them? Like, how do you actually address those things when they're so like embedded within, or is like, I may not even remember some of the stuff that I'm traumatized with.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and that's the beautiful thing that I love about energy work as opposed to like standard standard psychological therapy that most people are used to, like talk therapy, right?
Right.
Most of us have, we don't remember for the most part a lot of the things like you said that cause these traumatic things.
Mm.
And that's the beautiful thing. You don't have to know the memory if you can just connect with the emotion
Mm.
and allow the emotion to work its way through you. Sometimes you will get a specific memory, and that happens with me a lot. Something will come up,
Mm.
or when I get an idea of something to release for a client, they will get the memory and
Mm.
they know what it's tied to. But the beautiful thing is you don't have to recall the memory, and that's really comforting for people that have had, pretty severe trauma, right? No one wants to relive
Yeah.
severe trauma, right? I mean, and why do that? It's re-traumatizing.
Mm.
So it's
Exactly.
really learning to get comfortable with the emotions. And when you talk about relationships,
Mm.
it's learning to be in that moment. Like you might say something and that might trigger something in me.
Mm.
And so then I learned to say, okay, let's just set this aside. Like, we're just having a conversation and it's something from my past and I can deal with that later.
Okay. Okay. So it's, is it like the time and place for addressing things and addressing emotions? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That,
And if you
hmm?
go ahead. Okay. If you have the type of relationship where you can do this, you can do it in real time. So, for example, when my husband and I got married, we both had unhealthy relationships prior. And so we got married and we both realized that we're responsible for our own well-being.
Hmm.
So we were past all of the crappy dynamics that people generally have. So with both of us, if something happens with him and I end up feeling really awful or really upset or whatever, I know that it's not actually him.
Hmm.
I know that maybe he's having a bad time himself, or maybe he's triggered some patterns that I learned at home that aren't serving me well anymore. And so then I can say, hey, this is what I'm feeling, and I just need some space for this, and I need to work through it. And sometimes he can help me, and sometimes he can't. But if you can identify those patterns in your relationships, then you can stop the back and forth and the blaming and that kind of thing.
I like that. I like that a lot because it takes the accountability back onto the person or like myself. And then it's more of like, oh, what can I do? It's like, hey, can you help me with this? And it's like addressing like myself and not like something external that's like uncontrollable or you have no play in.
Exactly. And it gives you your power back.
Hmm.
Right? Because if we let other people make us angry, we are giving our power to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we realize that it's just our ego, our pride, our hurts, our wounds that are
Mm-hmm.
coming up to protect ourselves, then we can take that power back and we can say, okay, I can nurture myself. I can deal with this the way I need and let it go from this person and figure it out.
Very cool. Okay, so that's that's fantastic. I love that, especially like you're able to do that like in a relationship that you're able to talk to the person. What about if it's like you can't talk to this person? Like they're gone, they're out. Like they're out of your life, but you still like want to like work past something or work past like a memory or just as things come up. Like a
I'll give you a great example of that. So we form energetic connections all the time with other people.
hmm,
And some of them are more positive than others. And I kept finding that I had this, it's called a courting, Cording. I
okay.
had a courting with my ex-boyfriend that I'd been in a long-term relationship with. And I would clear it,
Hmm.
and then I would be aware of it again. And I kept discovering that he kept sending it out, but I kept accepting it. So I finally realized that the way to deal with that, instead of just cutting it off, was to change the part of me that was willing to accept what he was reaching out for. And this was all completely subconscious. This was not like aware of it.
Yeah.
So ultimately, when you have those memories and experiences from the past, especially like you're not necessarily going to go back to someone to navigate that,
Yeah.
you just heal it in yourself.
Okay.
That's all you're responsible for. And part of that is forgiving and releasing the other person and letting them go off to whatever good is coming for them. Right.
Amazing. I
But if
love
you
that.
heal yourself, you change that pattern and you break that.
Yeah, fantastic. And I love how you say it of like that of like I know like psychologically it's like you can't be like angry and grateful at the same time. Like they're just not compatible. And it's the same thing. You can't be forgiving and like resentful at like they can only be one or the other at any given time. So working through that,
Yes.
like yeah, working through it within yourself allows the release of the emotion to be able to yeah, to actually move past something.
Yes. And I think the other important part of that is having self-compassion. I love a lot of the Eastern philosophy stuff because it comes in really well here, I think. You know, the mindfulness and the being present and the self-compassion. Because I don't know, I think especially when we're kind of like high achievers, we expect things to happen and to move quickly. And
Yeah, you know.
right?
Uh,
I should have reached that goal last week, darn it, you know? And not everything happens that fast. We don't know what the timeline is. And so if we can have compassion with ourselves and just sit in the space, it makes it so much easier because sometimes things come back multiple times, right? And you hear the analogy of the onion, the layers of the onion, and it'll come back. And instead of thinking, oh, darn it, I thought I healed this, just realize that it's actually a next step. So you actually are making progress. You're going to a deeper level. And so you're having more growth.
Yeah, that's really good. Especially as I think anybody in entrepreneurship in general, things could always be faster or achieved faster. And yeah, in
Yes.
at least my experience has been like with emotional things, it does take time or repetition to actually like to for the healing process to take place and like to continue to move forward. Um so I
Yeah,
think
that
that's really
repetition is
insightful.
such a true thing.
Yeah. So I want to go back into so when did you decide to write your book? Like I know that's a big endeavor and I definitely want to congratulate you on that. What spurred you to want to write?
Well, first of all, I love writing.
Okay.
And I didn't really decide to write a book. A lot of what I do is impressions from God and from the Holy Spirit.
Hmm.
So I'm going to kind of go back just a little bit. When I started working with my clients earlier on, um, their deceased ancestors started to show up in the
Hmm.
sessions because they wanted to help with the healing. And
Okay.
I was like, well, this is kind of cool, but what do I do with this? And so I just kind of learned and was guided to develop that skill. And part of that skill is that I receive things by um, either by visions or in word. And
Hmm.
so the book is actually a compilation of poems that I received all along this healing process and healing journey that I went through. And so I'd been compiling them for a couple years. And, you know, I had printed a nice, pretty little copy for myself. And then God was like, you need to put that out there and share this with other people. I was
Hmm.
like, okay.
Okay, God,
So,
that's a little scary, but okay, sure, we'll go
yeah,
for it.
exactly. I'm like, that feels a little vulnerable. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Vulnerability, courage. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. Courage. Takes a lot of courage to be an entrepreneur,
That's yeah.
right? And to deal with all that emotional stuff and the interpersonal relationships that you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. So that's really interesting because a lot of so I've heard about like it's talked about a lot. It's more like mainstream of like generational curse or like generational like poverty. Like I think that's more of it, but I think it goes into it's not just the physical sense of poverty. It can also be the emotional sense or like generational things that last. So I think that's really powerful what you said there or hit on something key of actually having those visions or having the people that came before like, hey, like we want you to do better. Like we want you to heal from these things. At least that's my interpretation for what you're communicating. But how did that like affect your clients or like what did that lead to for them?
You know, it's amazing the healing that it brings people.
Hmm.
Um, I have one client in particular, his father, well, both of his parents were abusive, but his father especially was very abusive. And in one of our sessions, his dad showed up. He wasn't his son, my client was not looking to meet with him.
Hmm.
But he showed up and he explained a little bit of some things and he apologized. And that was extremely healing for my client. Very, very healing.
Yeah, I can't
Yeah.
imagine. Like that's like yeah, it's so powerful.
Is
Um,
that we all need that forgiveness, right? And to be able to hear that from someone who perpetuated violence against you, especially someone who's supposed to love you and make you feel safe,
yep.
you know, that just that opens the way for such growth.
Absolutely. So I am curious, like how, like, because obviously you can't meet with everyone. Like how would you advise someone that like wants to take action on this, or wants to like go through the healing process and maybe like do it on their own, or like try like same thing, like work through things and release this emotion. How would you like, what would you recommend for them?
Definitely, that's a fantastic question. So there are a couple things. One is I have a community on the school platform now, and I actually do group clearings in that free. It's a free group, and I'm doing group clearings every month in there. So you can come join that if you want. We do it for free. The second thing is get the book. It's called The Emotion Code.
Mhm.
Because in that book, Dr. Brad teaches you how to do the clearing for yourself.
Okay.
And then if all of that seems too cumbersome, what you can do is when you find yourself in a space with an emotion that you want to clear, just if you can just put your intention into letting it go. And so sometimes you can just kind of like tap by your heart, or you can tap on the top of your head. And sometimes all you have to do is speak. Like sometimes I'll just say, I am willing to let this energy flow through me. And you just have to allow it, and it'll pass through and it'll move. It's really about what your intention is. You don't really have to learn anything formal or fancy. You can do, there are a lot of things you can do on your own.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that sounds a lot more healthy than like I'm just ignoring that emotion, or I'm just gonna suppress that. So
Exactly. No suppression.
yeah, very interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd love to explore more of the like the flowing to the emotion like that flows through you. So because that's something I'm curious about, because like in times of like high stress or something like that, like is there ways to like let that flow through you to be in like more of a like a better state, or like what I guess what I'm thinking of like applications of this, of like, oh, okay, well obviously when I'm like angry or like in a like, oh, I need to remain calm, like let me let this flow through me so I can get to the next, or like I hear something, or like you know like huge business problem, like $100,000 thing just like happened, and then I'm like, okay, just like relax and just like move forward from this. How like it clearing, it sounds like that is like a fundamental principle. What like is it like, what is that based in, like from your research, from your experience, how does that actually work with it like flowing through you versus just like suppression or anything like that?
So I'm gonna go with the idea that you're talking about how to deal with these things like in the moment.
Yes.
That sound right? Yeah, because that's more difficult.
Mhm.
Anyway, right? Like you can go take breaks and exercise and hit a bag or something later and it'll get it out. But in the moment, so the basic principle that you were asking, everything is based upon, I guess, one of the foundational laws of the universe, which is that everything is vibrating, nothing rests. Right? Everything is constantly moving. And you can study physics or chemistry, or you can study spirituality, and they'll both basically tell you the same thing. Everything is moving. So if you understand the principal laws of how the world works, then you can apply them to yourself and it makes it easier. So everything is meant to move. So holding on to something is actually more of what causes us problems than the experience of it itself. And some people are afraid to express these things because they don't want to hurt another person. And there's truth in that, right? Like if you're really, really upset at a business deal, you can't really just go off on somebody. That's not very good. But in the moment, one of the best things you can do is just accept what you're experiencing.
Okay.
So if you can just like tell yourself, like today, I was just having a hard time with something, and I just said, Jen, it's okay. It's okay that you feel this way. It's okay that you have these emotions. Oh yeah, it is okay. I can just allow it. And then you can start just to talk to yourself however you want to let it process. So if you're having a conversation with somebody, for example, and let's say they've triggered something's come up and you're really upset at them and you just want to smack them. In your mind, if you can do it, you can just, first of all, acknowledge that you have that feeling. Just tell yourself that it's okay. This is a normal thing. You're a human, you're having it, whatever you need to say to yourself. And then you kind of will, once you start to do it, you'll start to feel if you're ready to let it go or if you need to keep staying in that space a little more. Because if you try to let something go before you're ready to, you'll just keep perpetuating that same emotion. Does that make sense?
Yes, that's interesting. So
Yeah.
it's almost like you have to actually accept it. You can't force it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's perfect. You have to accept what you're feeling and you have to accept it at whatever degree you need to before it can go through.
Hmm.
And so that's where like being okay with feeling that way is so important because then you can sit in that space while you're still, because you can do this at the same time. You can do this in the background of a conversation you're having with somebody, which is kind of crazy, right? But then the next step that I like to do is to just think whatever positive, loving thoughts I can and project them out toward the other person. So like even as you and I are sitting here talking, when you're asking me a question or if I'm talking, I'm just thinking, I love you. This is fantastic. This is so much fun. This is great. I'm just putting out there the kind of things that I want to be in this space while we're spending time here together.
Well, it's definitely coming through because yeah, like you almost have this aura or glow about you. So
Oh, thanks.
I definitely am feeling it over here as well. That's so incredible because I guess for myself, we'll just go into
Yes. Yeah. Let's talk about you and
we'll go
how
into
I can help you.
is um I tend to beat myself up about things that
Mm.
like didn't accomplish or thought I could have done better. And I feel like this is a very common thing with entrepreneurs, at least the people that I've talked to, and friends. And yeah, it's yeah, like the inner critic or the voice of like, oh, I could have done this better, or I could have used my time better. I could have done this. And yeah, what would you suggest for someone that may be in that position or even myself, that has this like critical voice, or like I don't know, this like, oh, I should be doing more or should have done better.
Yeah. There's that's a great question, by the way, because I think that's common to everyone to varying degrees, right? Part of it is the things that we heard growing up, and then part of it is just the natural man and Satan, honestly, right, wanting to put us down.
Mm,
And it so like there's a difference between saying, "Oh, I could have done that better," and feeling shame, or saying, "I could have done that better. How can I make it better?" Right? As a way to like propel yourself forward.
right.
So it's really like what's the emotional state that's accompanying that? And what I think I hear you saying is that it's more of like the shame, putting yourself down emotional state than
Yeah.
the encouragement, do better, go forward kind of thing.
Right.
Right.
Because I've experienced both. That's really interesting how you identified that. Because a lot of times, yeah, I mean, that's also what propels me of this, like, oh, we can be doing this better. Like, oh, this is how we'll improve for next time.
Yeah.
But it's on shame. So have you studied like shame or something? I've done a little bit of Brene Brown's, and I know shame is like not a good thing. It's like that's a very hurtful thing to dwell on.
Yes. Yeah. I've studied. So more of my stuff has actually been like by looking at the chakras and the energy systems.
Okay.
So, right. Shame is tied into our root chakra. It's tied around our core sense of being, like feeling okay to exist,
Hmm.
being okay with who you are at a core level. Because shame basically says there's something wrong with you,
Okay.
right? If you're feeling shame about something, it's like what you're doing is not okay and who you are is not okay. It's like you're not conforming to the rules somewhere.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of should around shame.
Yeah.
Yeah. And part of it is like this is a little bit of the longer term, but in the longer term, it's like figuring out what rules are you okay with for yourself,
Mhm.
and over time embodying those rules. And then also looking at, well, what rules are causing me to feel the shame that I can just part ways with and process and let go. And so in the moment, it's like, okay, it's like acknowledging that that emotion is there because it's not the thought that's the problem. It's the emotion that's tied into the thought that's the problem. It's how we feel about what we're thinking, right? And the beauty of it is that we can step outside of that space and look at what we're thinking and feeling, and then we can make a different choice.
That's
And
really.
that's honestly one of my favorite things about the gospel is that one of the core principles is our agency.
Hmm.
We get to choose. So you get the opportunity to choose something different. And you yourself, you're already very aware of it. You know that you have that voice going on, and it's repetitively making that choice over and over to train your mind to form new patterns, right? And you can go to the neuroscience, you're forming new patterns in your brain, new connections to think a different way. And what I love ultimately is a couple of different parts in the scriptures, but it says God tells us to look unto him in every thought. Think
Mm,
about things that are praiseworthy and of good rapport.
mm,
So as much as you can to get out of that shame, refocus yourself on something in the opposite direction that's positive and good and encouraging and loving.
right.
And over time, not as fast as you might want, of course, but over time it'll shift.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, because that's one of the most powerful things, especially about the scripture, is like we are divinely created. Like, and it's almost like when we're thinking those thoughts, it's like the enemy, it's like Satan saying, it's like, hey, you're not divine. Like you're not good enough. And yeah, and then like,
Yeah.
yeah, and instead like bring it back to like truth, like the truth will set you free. And that's like, no, you are divinely created. Is like, oh, I am worthy of, love and, to prosper. And yeah, I think that's really
Yeah.
powerful. And not, it's not enough of a, like a message to this generation, I feel, especially for entrepreneurs. Is like we go through the ups and downs, so it's yeah, it's definitely the a powerful way to like to self-regulate as well, or like emotionally regulate. So
Yes.
that's
Yeah,
fantastic.
I think if that's so critical, right? I think if you can learn how to do that, you're going to be so much more successful in life because you're going to feel better. And I think like one of the potential downfalls, and I mean, I teach mindset, right? I love the mindset. I think that's where it's all at. But one of the potential downfalls is that it can try to get us to focus too much on the positive.
Hmm.
You have to acknowledge that another one of the laws is the law of polarity, right? There are ups and downs. That's completely normal. And so if you think that you're never going to be sad, you're just going to end up being frustrated in life because you're going to have times when and
I
as
don't
an
have a bad day.
entrepreneur,
What? Yeah.
right?
Mm,
I mean, it's like all day long could be a roller coaster. It's like you're going through puberty again with those hormones.
hmm,
And so it's not about stopping that from happening. It's about allowing it and being okay with it, but also ultimately learning to spend more time in a higher and higher level.
hmm,
Because like your high today can be your low tomorrow,
hmm,
right? So you can keep moving upward and forward. Like years ago, my lows would last like a week.
hmm.
I mean, I would get really stuck in them. And I see this with people that I work with. They'll get stuck for a really long time. But now my lows will last me minutes, maybe 30 minutes tops, you know, and I can get out of it a lot quicker.
So
So
powerful.
that's part of the beauty that comes from learning how to navigate yourself emotionally.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely fantastic. So
Yeah.
as we wrap up here, again, anybody who's listening, watching this, if you want to, you can you can join the school group. I know that's one of the most powerful. You can actually talk with Jen through there and go to the group healing sessions. All her like all of your Instagram in the book and everything's going to be linked below, so you'll be able to find them. And what would, I guess as the last sentence, or what like last words of wisdom or encouragement would you leave for anybody that that watches or listens?
Yeah, I think I'm going to leave them with what you said, which is the truth, right? Remember who you are,
Hmm.
because that really is the answer to everything. And if you don't know who you are, go learn about that.
Mhm.
And really, ultimately, read your scriptures. That'll tell you who you are. And talk to other people who have found their way, and they'll tell you who you are. Because the more concrete you become in that, that's where your sense of self resides. And when you know that, then you're really not going to be swayed by the things of the world that are there to try to pull you over.
Amazing.